Good evening, folks. And today, and tonight, I should say, we're going to talk about megaphones. The invention of the megaphone. Now, this is more for like fans and like cheerleaders when they want to yell out to their team and say, "Go team, good luck," or they want to make the other team mess up when it comes to free throws or stuff of that nature. I've seen my fair share of megaphones in my lifetime. Now, you want to talk about the first creation of a megaphone. They weren't even called megaphones at the time. They're actually called trumpet voices. Actually. They were called trumpet voices because what's the point of calling it that? Now, I know that sounds a little funny and everything. I know it kind of tickles me to think of that and everything. That's why I'm kind of laughing a little bit. But I actually have one here. They say it sounds like this when you talk through it and everything. So that's what kind of makes it that way. So you see how it makes your voice a little louder. And when you talk through that, that makes it sound louder. That's why they call it the trumpet voice, because it makes it sound so louder so everyone can hear you. Now, there were two individuals, but this literally came out back in the Greek era, back in the 5th century BC, when the Greeks had like megaphones. Well, not necessarily megaphones. They created like a mask over there that they would speak out of, that would raise their voices loud enough where it would speak out to everyone in the area, where it would raise out for like a certain length of area. Now, some megaphones, now the first invention of a megaphone was actually like as early as like 1635 by Moreland, by a man by the name of Moreland. You should look up the megaphone and see what comes up. But 1655 was another time, but in 1635, Moreland created a megaphone where it could be heard within a mile and a half, or something like that. I might have the two mixed up. But it was made out of copper. Look at some of the... Here's the thing. If you see, like, copper pipe or anything like that, put your voice around it and see how far along it goes. A long copper pipe. Along there. And yell through it and see how far along it goes. See if you can hear yourself through the other end. It won't be as loud as this. Literally, if you see the size of this is almost like a cone. And when you talk through this, it's more like your voice goes straight out. It spreads throughout. It just goes straight out and it spreads as it goes out. And that's how your voice gets loud, because the frequency of your voice spreads out at a large function as it goes out the edge, as it goes out. Instead of just going straight through, it just goes straight out. It goes straight out at the end. Because once it goes through here, anything that's transmitted through the megaphone here goes straight out here and spreads into bigger areas. Now, the electronic megaphone, which is what's now used nowadays, aka blowhorn, or whatever you want to call it, bullhorn, blowhorn, trumpet voice, still call it trumpet voice, but you can call it, they call it all sorts of things, but 95% of the time they call it a megaphone. But that's literally what they call it. They call it the megaphone. So, but another area of interest for the megaphone comes back in 1878, when Thomas Edison came up with the idea to create a megaphone that would only cover a certain area. Now, there was another area of a megaphone where there was an Ottawa chief talking to his troops to get their attention, because it made his voice louder so they can hear him. But Thomas Edison's idea was so those who are deaf can actually hear him. Now, other megaphones that were finally being used, but that wasn't necessarily a megaphone. But finally the word megaphone came into play during the time of pretty much like the 1920s. That's when literally the first megaphone that was electronic megaphone came into play. That's literally where they got the idea megaphone. Now, literally, these were all now, Thomas Edison's megaphone was 6 feet 8 inches. Two outer ones were 6 feet 8 inches. Then one inside was literally, but that was to reach 2 miles or so and everything. I mean, that's literally how big it was. Some were 20, while at other training bases they made megaphones for certain things. It's interesting how they used megaphones during wartime, after wartime. Lifeguards used megaphones. They used these kind of megaphones, but a little bit bigger, but not necessarily. They used these kind of megaphones. These kind of megaphones were basically used get onto the water, now! I mean, sometimes they have a good voice. They could be, where people could be heard, but it's just mostly used for, on big sandy beach areas, mostly where they use these megaphones. That's literally how the megaphone was pretty much used, but back to the topic. Radio usage of megaphones was actually a thing back in the early 1900s. They would put a little megaphone on those old-fashioned round ones where you would have a radio, the old-fashioned radios where they would actually have a megaphone where once the radio was playing and it would be making that sound up there. That would be the megaphone. It would, every time something would play, it would have the megaphone. Right around the time of World War I, right after World War I ended, they decided to come out with the electronic megaphone. The first button they would press, they would try to, but even firefighters used a megaphone at that time, in the early 19th century, just so they could, the battalion chief or whoever was in charge would try to talk to his troops. Well, not necessarily his troops, but his firefighters under him. He would try to say, there's fire on the second floor. We need water on the second floor, please. But that megaphone was literally too short. Was too long, 6 feet long. Very hard to carry. Not like nowadays megaphones were this small. That thing was literally 6 feet long. I mean, you could probably put it on inside the carriage. That's in the late 1800s. But you put the megaphone on side in the late 1919, when the first radio player came out with a megaphone on it. And they would record. Recorder would be recording, and the video, and the megaphone would be playing it. Oh, it was really neat. You should see some of those. And then the record player would be another one. The record player would have a megaphone at the end of it. Every time it would play, it would have its megaphone at the end of the 1900s, just shortly after World War I. Then 1920 is when they officially came out with the megaphone system for, say, football games and other things of that nature. They needed a megaphone system to say, hey, we need to know who's carrying the ball, who's tackling. So they came up with a system to press buttons. So that was a PA system. I'm sure when you're at fairs or stuff of that nature, you ever gone to fairs, they would say, attention on the ground, attention on the ground. Stuart Jackson, please come to the administration building. Thank you. That's normally what they would say. They normally say, Stuart Jackson, come to the, or whatever name. I was just making that one up. I do deeply apologize if your name is Stuart Jackson and you take offense to this. Sorry. But that is literally how that normally would work. They would use the PA system to notify someone, or if there's anything going on outside the fairgrounds to come, or during the middle of a football game, use the PA system to announce who the ball carrier is or what went on in the play, or if it was intercepted by whoever and everything. who made the tackle, who scored the touchdown, and or in basketball games, who scored the bucket, who the foul was called on, or literally everything. That's literally how the PA system works. And they use PA systems in schools. Those are also you kind of use like how a megaphone is. Because some megaphones nowadays, but they didn't have that kind of megaphone system until later. That was the megaphone system used later on. But now the megaphone system that we have nowadays is actually used just by like hands, and you just use it like that and you yell through it. It's pretty funny. This one I watched the other day with this one guy yelling through a megaphone. I literally fell over laughing because he was yelling through it. I'm like, oh, you people really amuse me. I don't know if it's just your stupidity and just wanted to yell through the megaphone for no reason, or just because you just wanted to. I literally just wanted to fall over laughing watching it. You should click on the link in the link in description is not on here, but you should look up people yelling through megaphones. It's 2 seconds long. It's literally absolutely hilarious. He just yells through the megaphone is all he does. But cheerleaders use these kind of megaphones, so did their fans, so they could just yell and just say, hey, go whatever team you're rooting for. I'm not really going to endorse any team right now. I'm just saying this is the kind of megaphone they use. Sometimes they'd be a little larger. They'd have a hand thing down here where they would hold it and be able to hold a little better, but mine doesn't, unfortunately. But that's literally how a cheerleader's megaphone or a fan's megaphone would be used. It would have the team's mascot or name on the side of the megaphone, and they would just hold it and just yell through it. It was pretty good how they used the megaphone back in those days. And nowadays. Because megaphones are quite different. And they go out wide and they have like a little thing in the middle, just like how the PA systems do. Just like sirens do. Sirens are the same way. They have sirens on them. You just press a button, there's a siren. Press that button, that makes another noise, and you press this button back to that. You just pull back the button, you start talking through it. It's pretty funny. You should watch Angry Grandpa Loses It. That's another one with the megaphone on it. That's pretty funny. He's actually pretty damn funny. Rest in peace, Angry Grandpa. You were quite a character to me. But it was quite the scenario when you have all these things that go on that make people go, okay. Now it's time to watch how this whole thing will go down in history. Then, as megaphones became more of a thing, in the 60s, they were more of like a box. If you watch the Andy Griffith Show on the rescue of Helen and Andy Taylor in the cave, I can't remember the name of the episode, Barney gets them all together. It's actually pretty funny when he does it, because everyone walks past him like, yeah, okay, we get the damn point. He says, attention, attention, this is an emergency. We need as many volunteers as possible. This concludes this transmission. Or something like that. I mean, it's actually pretty funny. But I actually literally fell over laughing watching that. But if you look at that megaphone, it looks like your average megaphone. The only difference with this megaphone is it's got like a little box in the back that's like some of those radios that you normally see, but it's got like a little box that he's pulling on and he just starts talking through it. I've never seen a megaphone. That's an older model megaphone, obviously. But if you look at older model megaphones versus the newer model megaphones, you'll see the significant difference between the two. Because the newer model megaphones don't have boxes on them compared to the older model megaphones. So, that's something that would be interesting to see versus the newer model megaphones. Now the question is, if we were to pull out an older model megaphone and it still actually had its power, do you think they would actually work? That's something you'll have to find out. I'm sure they'd be worth a lot of money, though, if they actually worked. Same with radios. Well, unfortunately, I got things And with all these megaphones, then the megaphone just pretty much took off into light space because it was pretty much able to cover areas where people can't be heard. But the megaphones were pretty much a hit back in the... And they still are to this day. They use them at protests, they use them at rallies, they use them at pep rallies, they use them at get-togethers. They use them all over the place. And I wouldn't necessarily call football games or basketball games megaphones, but even though I would call that more like a PA in high schools or school systems, I wouldn't necessarily call those megaphones. I call those more like PA systems, but they're kind of like a megaphone, but not necessarily on the same category as a megaphone. Even though they kind of look like the megaphones you see at protests and stuff of that nature, but they're not operated the same way as a megaphone. Now, with that being said, and same as an airplane. Now, with that being said, I have some other things I gotta do, so with that being said, I'm out of here. Hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace.